Will you all sign? Matt? Could we all please take a seat? Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to do a quick roll call of the Economic Development Committee. Sherry Sanderson.
Present.
Ann Derber.
Here.
Dick James.
Present.
Steve Sheriff.
Present.
And absent is Michael Wildy, Steve Kuhn, and Wendy Newport. Could I get a motion from a committee member to accept the agenda? There are agendas in the back.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Phil Spear. I'm currently the chair of the Economic Development Committee. I'm going to kind of go through and just do a quick format of the meeting before I turn it over to Doug. Give you a little bit of background on what we're doing. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming. I had no idea how many people would show up tonight. We are looking for your input after we go through the slides, so there will be opportunity for Q&A. For those people that are on Zoom, we will unmute you when we get to the Q&A. You can also type in questions. Why did we do the format of the meeting? After my opening remarks, when I turn it over to Doug, I'm going to ask you to hold your questions till he gets through his slide deck. Some of your questions might get answered as he goes through the slide deck, and I think it'll keep the flow of the meeting better if we wait till he gets through the slide deck to ask Q&As. So why did we do a survey? I got involved in the Economic Development Committee at about the start of 2001. The committee had been on a hiatus because of COVID. And as we met through 2001, we're trying to focus on, or trying to look at what we should be focused on. One of the things we looked back on is when the committee was originally formed in 2017, they did a survey of the community. And one of the things that came out of that survey was the need for broadband. And I'm sure you don't all know the detail, you know the detail, but I think they really hit a home run on that one. I think, Boulder Junction got on the broadband wagon early, and then the pandemic hit, and every rural community in America realizes they need broadband. I don't expect we'll hit that kind of a home run with this survey, but at the same time, we thought 5 years had lapsed. It'd be a good time to do another survey to kind of take the pulse of the community. So we started working on the survey, believe it or not, almost a year ago. We started in the fourth quarter of last year, building what we wanted the survey to look like, and it did take a lot of time. How did we communicate the survey? We communicated the survey electronically, the town's website, the chamber's website, the library. We pushed it out to lake associations. We asked businesses to put it on their Facebook page. We asked them to put it on their websites. We were asked, why didn't we do a paper survey? And one of the reasons is, and we did talk about it, one of the reasons is there's some logic in the survey. In other words, every respondent didn't get asked the same question. If you answered, I'm a resident of Boulder Junction, you didn't get asked how often you vacation here. Had we done a paper survey, it would have had to say, if you answered question number 2 this way, jump to question number 7, and we just thought it would have been too confusing. So we did make the decision to do it 100% electronically. It's also an anonymous survey. We did not ask you for any personal information. We did ask you if you wanted to participate in a drawing for a $25 gift card. Coontail donated 10 $25 gift cards. You could give us your email address. Once we distribute those gift cards, which will be coming up shortly, those email addresses will just be stored in the town office for the required open records time period, in which time they will be shredded. So we're not maintaining any personal information of anybody. When Doug talks about being able to identify respondents to a question, we can identify, did that person say they were a Boulder Junction resident? Did that person, but we can't say who answered the question. Where are we going to go from here? So tonight is really presenting the data to you, but then we need your feedback on really where do we go from here. So there's a lot of slicing and dicing we can do with the data, and hopefully we'll come up with some actionable items in the future. As you all know, there is no such thing as a perfect survey, right? Surveys have problems. Do people tell you the truth? Did we get enough response to accurately represent the area? You know, we're in an election cycle right now and people know, you know, you see polls on the news every night. Well, a poll is literally a survey. And we know that political polls are not necessarily always accurate. So you've got to kind of try and filter the answers a little bit. Do people answer questions consistently? Sometimes you'll see an answer and you'll say, well, they should have answered the next question this way and they didn't. Well, why did they do that? So now I want to introduce Doug. Doug and his wife Sally are seasonal residents of Boulder Junction. They live in Dallas. We won't hold that against them. But Doug got involved in the analysis of the 2017 survey. And he made the mistake of mentioning to me, gee, Bill, I wished I would have been able to help build that survey. So when it was time to do this survey, we reached out and Doug agreed. And Doug's background is data analytics. So the good news is we really have a brain surgeon here. And I hope everybody in the room will express their appreciation to Doug, because I am truly not exaggerating if I told you he has several hundred hours in this survey up to this point. Okay. So it is a work in process. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce Doug Potts. He'll go through the slide deck, and then after the slide deck, we will open it up for Q&A. When we do the Q&A, though, I want to run around with the microphone because we are taping this meeting, which Sherry and the library are going to post on their YouTube site. So for anybody who wants to see the meeting, and our plan is this slide deck will be linked on the town website. So people will have access to this slide deck. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Doug Potts. And again, thank you all for coming tonight. There are some cookies in the back, which I made today. If you like them, that's great. If you don't, I don't want to hear about them. That might, I think you just got to turn it on.
It just has to be turned on.
Hello. Okay, we're
You're
good.
live.
We're good. So what we're going to do here is a little background on the survey. Bill may have covered some of this. Survey went live July 21st, and we did it about a month ago. We had 504 total responses, which I'm sure is a little less than what we were hoping for. This presentation that I'm doing tonight, we're presenting most of the questions, just the raw data for most of the questions. We excluded some of the boring ones like annual income and age and stuff like that. But for the most part, you're going to get 85% of the questions in this. You will also be able to see the entire survey online. You'll also be able to see the entire survey online. So we're not sharing any insights. We have done no real data analysis here. All we're doing is presenting you the raw data as it came in, and this is what people said to the questions. So when we get to the end, though, what I'm going to show you is a few slides that shows you how we can do some data analytics and how we can slice and dice this data. And if for interested parties, we give you the option and the opportunity to come to us and say, I'd like some information about this particular area. And we can do some analytics based purely upon what people's interests and needs are, rather than trying to do all the analytics for all the data for everybody, because that would be more than 200 hours. So in this survey, we did get a pretty good separation of respondents. Pretty much a third in Boulder Junction, Wisconsin, and then the rest of the area, a lot from near Boulder Junction as well. We did get some from Illinois and Minnesota and other places as well. Places as from as far south as Texas, Florida. The idea, we were hoping to get more responses from vacationers to get their input regarding the town of Boulder Junction. So this question where we asked them to describe their affiliation with the town of Boulder Junction, this is for people who said that Boulder Junction was not their primary residence. So 44% of the respondents said they go to Boulder Junction for shopping, dining, etc., but don't stay overnight. A good third of them live part or all of the year in Boulder Junction, even though Boulder Junction is not their primary residence. Even though Boulder Junction is not their primary residence. I'm too tall. Then we had 20% who vacation and stay overnight in Boulder Junction. And then we did have 4% who we asked that they used to be associated with the town of Boulder Junction and what was their affiliation and why they were no longer affiliated with the town. As we kind of expected, the age demographics kind of skewed towards the older generations. Roughly 60% of us were over 55 who responded to the survey. We did have 31% of the respondents who say they lived in Boulder Junction have been here for more than 20 years, but we did get a good sampling of all the different other time periods as well. Now, for people who said that Boulder Junction is their primary residence, we have 60% live year round, 21% live at various times of the year, and 20% also, 19% live seasonally in Boulder Junction. And relating to that seasonal, we asked them which seasons they live here. And surprise, surprise. For those who live in Boulder Junction, we asked, who live part of the year, we asked what they do with their house when they're not here. You see a lot of them close it up, but we do have a lot of family and friends who use the house while they're not here. For people who stated that they were permanent or part-time residents of Boulder Junction, we posed a question regarding additional town services. The environmental practices and policies is a fairly nebulous term, but basically we can read this as people are concerned about the environment. Whether or not there's a specific thing that can be addressed, we don't know, but we did also see that people realize that sewer and water distributed by the town is not going to be a viable solution as well. For people who lived in a town near Boulder Junction, we asked them their perception of the town. And we did get 46% who consider it their town, even though they don't live in Boulder Junction, or one of their towns. So they seem to have an assimilation with the town of Boulder Junction, even though they don't necessarily live here. Again, for the same group of people, how often do they visit Boulder Junction? And you'll see that 56% visit Boulder Junction at least once a week. So these outside people are in our town quite often. We did ask for people who live near a town if they were ever considered living in Boulder Junction. And we did have 32% who said yes. And for those people, we asked why they chose not to live in Boulder Junction. And these were the reasons that they chose, that they indicated for the reasons they were not living in Boulder Junction. Typically, housing. Healthcare did come in there at 18%, and too far from needed businesses at 20%. So we asked them regarding the housing, if it's they couldn't afford the housing, what is an appropriate monthly rent or house payment? And you'll see that most of them were between $700 and $1,100 a month. What size house would they need? Again, mostly 3-bedroom. A few people need 5 or more bedrooms. One. So this is for people who stated they live in a town near Boulder Junction. We asked them regarding their work habits. And you can see again, because of our age demographics, that a lot of them do not work. But we did have some who indicated that they commute to work in Boulder Junction. They work from home from Boulder Junction. So we did have some responses from people who do work in Boulder Junction. They just don't live in Boulder Junction. For people who commuted to work in Boulder Junction, we asked whether they owned it or whether they worked for the business. So we did get some responses from people who own businesses in Boulder Junction, as well as employees of those businesses. So again, we asked about working in Boulder Junction. People who say they've worked in Boulder, they do work in Boulder Junction. People who don't work in Boulder Junction, we asked them if they've considered this. And you'll see that we did get 39% say they have considered working in Boulder Junction. So we drilled down a little bit into that to find out what was the reason that affected their decision not to work in Boulder Junction. So skill set, a job they wanted, adequate pay. Those were the primary reasons. Then we talked with the people who vacation in Boulder Junction. And we asked them typically how often they vacation in Boulder Junction. And we had quite a few responses that said a few times a year. So we're getting a lot of people several times throughout the year, not just like I used to be once a year for a week or two. And then the months that they vacation in Boulder Junction, again, you see the summer months right up there. In fall, and April, March, and November came in the strong last. Where do they stay when they visit Boulder Junction? And we asked regarding housing, lodging options, I'm sorry. If there is enough, if there's more than enough or not enough. And you'll see it roughly 2/3 so there's enough lodging options in Boulder Junction. Then we asked them, what is it about the town of Boulder Junction that makes them want a vacation here? And obviously lakes, nature, fishing, top 3, but the people I found was quite interesting. So now we have to start getting to the crux of the economy. We asked them what they think about the economy of Boulder Junction, whether or not they have concerns. 2/3 indicated they have concerns about the state of Boulder Junction's current economy. So we asked them, what's their opinion? And half of them said somewhat good. 36% said bad or somewhat bad or very bad. So they have an interesting sample here because we have quite a few who think it's bad and quite a few who think it's somewhat good. We posed this question specifically to get people off of the center point. We posed this question to get people off the center point. We didn't want them to say, it's okay. We said it's either good or bad. You got to lean off that center point. So we asked them then for their general outlook for the town's economy in the upcoming years, and we posed this over roughly 23-year period. And you can see that again, the very goods and the very bads are increasing over a time period. So these are things which can affect the state of Boulder Junction's economy. We asked them to indicate how much of them they think they affect the town's economy. So our four choices were a large effect, a moderate effect, little effect, or no effect. And as you can see, obviously, tourism, outdoor recreation, those were big. And we asked them to think about the economy of our neighboring towns and tell us their opinion of those towns, so we can then compare them to their view of our town. So again, it's from the very good, somewhat bad, very bad. So you'll see, for instance, Presque Isle at the top, 7% said very good. Oops, Minocqua, 47% said very good. So this gives you an idea then of how people, their perception of our town relative to these other towns. Then we asked regarding the population and the number of businesses, should there be more, the same, or less? So we had 59% said the population should remain the same, and 59% said the number of businesses should increase. So we asked them regarding population over the next 24 years, I guess it was, how they view the population. And I'm going to kind of go through this rather quickly. You're going to see the data move. So here we have, typically a very small, or I should say, sticking around what we've got right now is 975. But as we go through the years, you'll see people are estimating that the town should continue to grow. And you'll see that in 20 years, 12% of the population thought the town population should be close to double what it is now. So we asked them we gave them a list of businesses which were not in Boulder Junction. We asked if they would, may or may not, or would not patronize that business. So you can see here, the bakery is sorely missed. A brewery, winery, distillery, drugstore, those all came up pretty high. Again, this was for everybody. This was not just for residents of Boulder Junction, this was for everybody who took the survey. We asked about actively recruiting residents to the town of Boulder Junction. It's pretty evenly split between yes and no on this. We asked about actively recruiting businesses to the town, and it's skewed more towards the yes. Kind of goes along with the previous slide that indicated most of the people wanted more businesses in the town of Boulder Junction. We asked for ways they think the town should recruit new businesses. And these three options were posed to them. We did ask them to write in other options. If they had other ideas, we did not include any write-in options in this presentation, but those will be available too. We asked specifically about tourism and the effect it has on the Boulder Junction's economy. we realize this. We asked about restaurants. Now, this is a list of all the outdoor recreational activities in the area. And we asked if it would be something that they currently participate in, or if they would if it was available, or if they don't or would not participate in. So some of these are available within the town of Boulder Junction right now. So some of the things we're able to gather from this just off the top is that for people who who say that they, for instance, horseback riding, 24% said that they would do horseback riding if it was available. I understand horseback riding is available in Boulder Junction. We had the same situation with the shooting range. 32%, 32% said that they currently do, but then we had 21% said that they would if it was available. So this gives us an opportunity to see if there are businesses currently in the area that may not be getting the word out about their business. So this is the end of the raw data minus the boring questions. So the next step now is to go through and analyze this data. And we used a tool to do the survey called Civilytics. And it provides us some powerful survey options like branching and logic, et cetera. But it also provides us the ability to do a lot of analysis of the data as well. So for instance, we can compare responses to questions based upon responses to other questions. And I'm going to show you an example of that here. For instance, this next one is the outdoor activities. That screen that we just saw so this is the outdoor activities sorted alphabetically for people 55 and older. Now, when we look at this, you'll see there's a lot of red up there. A lot of 55 and older are not going to be participating in these activities. But when we look at the 55 or younger, you'll see that there's a lot more activities going on with the younger crowd. And so we now have the option of being able to identify what are some of these activities that need to be targeted towards younger people versus them, and which one should we not be trying to include the older generation if that's not something they would be doing anyway. We asked how often they typically vacation Boulder Junction. I showed you this slide before. What we can do then is we can break this down. I know it's going to be hard for you to read from the very back there, but we can see their responses based upon if they live in Wisconsin versus if they lived in Minnesota or Illinois, or if they live someplace else. So we can identify that if they live in Wisconsin, they're much more apt to be coming several times a year than if they live someplace else. This is the kind of analysis that we can do. Here we took the question about what they typically spend for a meal, and pardon my fat fingers here. And we now broke it down based on where they live. For instance, in Minnesota, Illinois, they typically spend, more people will spend this amount of money on breakfast than in other areas. Again, we're not going to be able to do anything with this particular analysis, but this gives you an idea of what we can do. And going through all the meals here, weekend brunches, the lunches, pretty much the same there across the board. But those people in Minnesota and Illinois do like to spend the good money on the nice dinner. here we broke that, about their feelings about the current economy based upon how long they've lived in Boulder Junction. So these are people who say Boulder Junction is their primary residence, and we broke it down by how long they've lived here. And you'll see that people who lived 5 to 10 years, they're more evenly split between being happy and having concerns, as opposed to people who live here for less than 3 years. 29% are happy, 77% are concerned. And then we go over here to more than 20 years, 22% are happy, 78% are concerned. So we can get an idea of based on how long somebody's been living in this town, what their expectations for what the town's economy should be. And their current opinion of the current economy, again, in that same group, I'm sorry, this is the 10 to 15 group, very happy. They had a high number that was very happy with this relative to all the other groups. So if you want to get some analysis of the data done, you can send an email to this address, survey@townofboulderjunction.org, explaining what you like, what you want to do with the data as well. This helps us better identify what kind of analysis we'll need to provide you. And as well, this report, as well as the complete general survey report, which will have everything from the responses, will be available on the town's website as well. Oh, and gift cards will be awarded.
Thank you, Doug. So what we just showed you is the data we got. Obviously, we're not telling you what the data is telling us. We're asking you, what do you want to learn from this data? So Rick's going to be our writer downer guy. And what we would like now is to know what more people would like to know from the data we gathered. And I'd also just be curious to know what some of your reactions are to what you just heard. And again, please raise your hand. I'm going to bring the mic around because we are recording this and you won't be heard otherwise. So anybody got any initial question or comment, or where can I start? And maybe identify yourself too, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Steve Weber, and I appreciate the data you presented. Did a good job. The question I have is, what is your confidence in this data from the perspective of sample size? And I noticed as you rotated through your N, it kept showing as a capital N as opposed to a capital N, and then when you're going into subsets to small n, representing the population, talking statistics, everybody. But the reality, I question, what does some of these small n's really mean? And is that sample size adequate enough to draw those conclusions that we're kind of pulling through in this presentation?
So that goes back to that first statement where we said we had 504 responses, which we weren't. We were hoping for more. Obviously, we can't project, with especially those very small samples of 7, we can't project that to a much larger audience. Right. So the best we can do is get an understanding, a general feeling, but we certainly can't necessarily, we can provide our opinion about what this is what people are saying, what they're thinking. This is only people who take the survey. You know, there could be a lot of people who had other ideas who would have agreed or may have disagreed either way. But yes, it's a small sample size relative. We might be able to project it to some of the subpopulations, depending on how large those are. But, you know, confidence probably 75% or so. It's probably pretty close.
And that's exactly what my concern was, is that somebody not paying attention to the upper right of the screen, seeing that small population size, believes that this actually represents the greater population or community, may be misled.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of demographic stuff in here that would be interesting, especially when you look at the respondent ages versus maybe what the actual demographic of the community is, and how is the survey tailored that maybe the older population felt more comfortable or seemed to identify with the questions better than the youngers and nobody, they didn't want to give it the time.
Right.
So.
If I can just add, and correct me, Doug, here, I think of the 504, 124 said they were residents of Boulder Junction. So if we have a population of 975 in Boulder Junction, including children, I don't think we got a bad response from the residents of Boulder Junction. I think where we, I don't want to use the word failed, but where we could have gotten a lot better representation was we didn't get a lot of response from people who, for example, live outside Wisconsin. So we didn't, I don't think we got a good feel for our tourist base. And we had 125 people who said they live in a town near Boulder Junction. So that's, whatever, Presque Isle, So I think we got a pretty good feel for people who live near Boulder that either work here, vacation here, or recreate here. But again, I agree with you. I think some of the questions you look at, you say, well, 14 people answered this. How valuable is it?
Absolutely, and I don't want to be critical and
Yeah.
say it's all garbage, because that's not the case. But I do think that when people are gonna look at numbers, we all do, and we can manipulate those numbers, as Doug can tell you, 100 different ways to tell 100 different stories. And I think the important parts in there we need to really focus on, and some of the stuff that doesn't have maybe the credibility, we need to be brutally honest about it.
Yeah, I think we should join our committee. I'm serious. Who's next?
Jeff Long from Boulder Junction. One thing that leaped out at me when I was looking at this was the very strong importance on tourism for our future. I hear people talking about, no, we're just a retired community. Of course, that's just a retired people saying we're just becoming a retired community so often. What we do, this tourism and promotion of tourism is absolutely vital beyond any description for our future. That's my opinion.
Thank you. And if I can kind of add to that, Doug alluded to it, but what are some of the takeaways from here on the, can you go to the recreational one? It was like 36 or something. And he mentioned, who in here belongs to the gun club? Do you want more people at the range? Or would you say we have enough? Because I don't shoot, I don't know.
We never say no.
Okay,
We
so-
welcome everybody and we teach
Yeah,
people.
so to me, this survey would say you should be doing something to let people know there are people coming to our community that would shoot if they knew it was there. So maybe you need to have an open house.
Just, we held open houses. We sponsor the Eagle River Trap Team because Minocqua is sponsored by the Minocqua Gun Club. We have free women's days that they come to and try to promote this. And and they're very well attended. And with the kids, we let the kids shoot for free. The rest of us pay for, we feel it's important to promote the next generation.
Who else has a question? I know you did all the stumping critics.
I am Brower, not a full-time resident, but more than half-time here. Another guy is going to be. What's it, Rutgers? The question I have for the committee is, the whole point of doing a survey is to gain insights that are actionable. And so there would be governmental actions, there would be private industry and private business action, there might be NGO. But I guess my question is, there's enough, I think, interest and commitment to find a way to keep this a vital community for the long run. I'd like to understand sort of what's the long range plan, because yes, you don't do a survey like this every year. You do it longitudinally, like you said, maybe it's every 5 years you do something like this, but there needs to be a long range action plan that can be communicated to the interested parties. I mean, it is economic development. So there's tourism, which has been a foundation of the community for a long time. But we've got broadband now, so we have all sorts of other opportunities that open up. I'm sure some of you feel like we could use more days we could go to a restaurant in town. There could be more services in town, there could be more industry or businesses in town.
Main Street doesn't look like it did 7, 8 years ago right now. So I would just be interested in hearing a little bit more from how you plan to sort of over time do tabs and cross tabs, pull out some of the insights, and then be able to socialize that across the community. So people who aren't here tonight and may not even be aware that this was completed will be given some information that maybe can help them help this community grow.
Thank you.
I'll let you,
That's
an economic committee meeting.
that our committee has asked the town for the past year, and I believe it's going to be built into the budget, to engage in a community long-range plan. Our town has, to my knowledge, has never done that. And to me, a survey is the analogy I've been using to people is a survey is, if you think of it as it relates to healthcare, to me, a survey is a routine physical. It gives you vitals. Okay. It's like going to your doctor and getting your blood pressure and your blood work. But a plan is really more like a wellness plan. So for example, if I have a routine physical and I have high blood pressure, that's good information to know. But what's the action plan to address that? So what we're hoping is that this is really data. But we completely agree that we need to create some actionable items that have measurable outcomes. Here's an interesting one too, because it's been on my drum a little bit. If you go back to slide 10, which is what other services should the town provide? And what's interesting is, we asked the question of constable or police officer, because we know that's been a conversation in the past, right? And it's yes, but it's yes by a small margin. The second question says, should the town be collecting garbage or a recycling collection? The answer is no. People are saying, oops, we don't want you collecting them. But then the next question says, should we be engaged in environmental practices? Overwhelmingly says yes. One of the conversations I've been trying to have is, should we be doing organic composting at the transfer station? A lot of communities are engaging in organic composting. The sewer and water is an interesting question, because I'll bet you'd get a completely different answer if you ask business owners downtown, right? But anyway, that's just kind of a thing. Who else has questions? This isn't just about me talking. I came here tonight to
hey, Bill, one more thing. So when we started this survey, we were looking at hundreds and hundreds of possible questions. So part of the issue that we ran into was, what are we going to do? Are we going to just start creating a huge survey that's going to gather tons of information that only 10% of the people are going to complete because it's going to take so long? So we had to kind of scale back these questions to a point where we thought, this is a survey length that we're going to find most people are willing to spend the time to complete. Knowing that at some point we may need to have a follow-on survey based upon the results of this survey to dig deeper into some of these issues that may be identified. So it's not as if this one survey was intended to answer all possible questions regarding the town's economy.
Steve here.
Feel like I'm monopolizing the mic. To this young lady's point back here, I think, metrics or KPIs are always important, right? In everything we do. And I recognize this is just a survey, and my ignorance, I don't know what the goals and objectives of the economic development group or committee is. Okay. But what does that perfect, economic model for Boulder Junction look like? So you collected a bunch of data. How do you measure that against something that we're driving towards? And that's the part that, I did the survey, and you're kind of left with, well, where are we trying to get to? We talk about what it was like 10 years ago. Let's talk about what it was like 50 years ago and 40 years ago. There's a few in the room that still remember what Boulder Junction looked like in what some would still call the heyday, okay? Every business was filled up, right? Muskie Day was a completely different animal than it is today. There were thousands of people littering the streets, right? Is that what we're striving for? And I think, we need to really catch what our identity is as a community. We've migrated to be a senior citizen community over time. I mean, I can tell you that when North Lakeland Elementary School opened up and I was in the first class to go through, I think there was 60 kids in my class alone. And 30% of them came from Boulder Junction. You'd be hard pressed to find that number of kids living in Boulder Junction anymore. And so I would encourage all of us to really look at, similar to we do with our wealth managers in our portfolio, are we all driven to one direction more so than the other? Are we all in bonds right now and we don't have enough in cash or in stock? And I think that's how we need to look at the people and the makeup of this community. What does a healthy community look like? And out of that, what does the healthy economy look like that generates from that? Because I still feel when I look at this, Boulder Junction is underrepresented from the family perspective. If we continue to migrate towards an aged population, just like churches and other institutions in this country, they die. And Boulder Junction will die. And that's the last thing, you know, as somebody that grew up here and lives here full time with my wife and my family has long ties to wanting to be involved in Boulder. You hope that there's a plan in place that will allow that to happen. So taking too much time.
That's fine. Kind of your first question is, part of the reason I wanted to do the survey was my first year on the committee was kind of like we kept playing flavor of the month for. But to answer your question, what can we do? We would like to do something. In hindsight, the broadband initiative in the town of Boulder Junction came out of the economic committee, and I had nothing to do with it because I was not involved at the time. So to me, that is an example of what can be done, and it was a multi-year effort by some extremely committed volunteers, right? I mean, I think we can all be happy with that. But who else has questions or comments? Oh, I wanted to just add your population thing. It's my understanding the average age in Vilas County is somewhere in the neighborhood of 55, 57. The average age in the state of Wisconsin is about 37. Okay, so what I hear what you're saying, but it's not a Boulder Junction problem. It's a Vilas County problem.
But my argument is it should be whatever we want it to be. We should drive towards some model that we want, which almost sounds like, you know, utopia, and we want to create our own social, you know, engineered environment. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the decisions that this committee and this group that is sitting here today make will impact Boulder Junction for 20 and 50 years. And so you've got to put that out there, even though it may be a non-attainable goal, you got to put it out there, right? So, and I think the broadband is a good example of things that this committee can do. The challenge I see is that what's the metric of the broadband of success? The fact that I can do Netflix and do those types of things, or is it actually driving economic development in the community, bringing in other businesses or remote workers or whatever it is? Because, you know, some may be familiar with the concept of new money. When we worked for our parents as a kid, they said at some point they got to kick you out so you can go make some new money. But you making my money that I already earned, right? How do these investments that we as a community are making going to bring new money into the community? So.
Who else has questions or comments? You run around the room here.
I have a big mouth. You probably don't even need the microphone. Ellen Murphy, Blacktown. My question is, do you have a timeline on coming up with a list of actionable, for a lot of the same themes going through here, a list of actionable recommendations to either the town or, you know, work for the committee, work for additional groups? And then beyond that, what are going to be the key performance indicators to let us know, us as the stakeholders, know whether the goal, you know, whether that actionable item was met. And I know you haven't done the full analysis yet, so it's more a time frame question, and then thought given to, are you planning on developing key performance indicators? I guess that's it. Thanks.
I'm hearing from some people that need to join the committee. That's not a joke. Part of my answer to you is, to me, the survey took a lot longer than I even thought it was going to, but having said that, I think the survey turned out really good. I think if we could have, when we first started this, I said, I'd like to see 1,000 responses. I think 500 is a minimum. 750 would be good. 1,000 would be more representative. We didn't get there, okay? And we can Monday quarterback that. But back to your answer, I think, you know, we will take this back to the committee. Our committee meets the first Wednesday of every month at 8:30 in this building. It's an open public meeting. You are more than welcome to attend and join us and help us as we try and identify actionable items and move forward. I think, you know, Steve, I completely agree with you. You know, when you talk about, you know, we need to attract, but at the same time, how do you do it? You know, I think the project that's being proposed for the rebuild on George is, in my opinion, a great step forward. I think when anybody is willing to invest that amount of dollars in the community, that will attract other dollars. There's a significant investment going on at the Catholic Church right now, which is another attractiveness of the community, right? It's a reflection of what's going on. Who else has comments? I want to thank you all for coming, but can I just, I saw your hand first.
Hi, my name is Jeff Jackson. I'm a resident of Boulder Junction. And on one of the slides, I did notice, I wasn't able to read it, but it said something about dilapidated buildings. I'm not sure which one it was, but to me, when I drive down the main street, I see several vacant buildings that haven't been attended, or nothing's been done to them for a long, long time. And it just, to me, it gives me the impression of Boulder Junction not really, not as friendly a town as it could be. When I see these buildings left, you know, with nothing, yeah, that's up there, 44%. Okay. So I was just curious about that, if there was something that we could do to restore these empty buildings.
Thank you. I'm in complete agreement with you, and I don't know if Dennis or anybody else wants to make a comment, but you're probably aware Boulder Junction has no zoning. We default to the county. And if a building's not considered a health hazard, there's really nothing. Dennis, am I wrong on that?
You're right, but it's very difficult to take the building and have it removed with the legal issues that relate to it. Not an easy task. We dealt with that problem with residential homes that burnt, and it's still not completely removed yet, and that's like going on 5 and 6 years. It's a difficult process. It's something that we're all concerned about. I hear it a lot being involved what I do with the town. But it takes, if somebody wants to buy a building, it takes an investor to buy a building, then it takes that investor to spend his money or her money to remove it or replace it or rebuild it. And it's not an easy task. But it's something that we would, obviously, there's a lot of us sitting here tonight would like to see improvements in that area.
There's really no easy way to do it. The first thing that popped in my head when you're talking about dilapidated buildings, I remember when we, with the Lions Club, right after we were formed, made it a project to go clean up Porter Dean's yard.
That took more than an afternoon.
But all we wound up doing was made room for more.
It's called recycling. Part of that environmental practice.
There's no more.
Carol Phillips, I'm a half-time resident of Presque Isle. I know one of the slides, I think, said that housing costs was one of the reasons people couldn't live up here. And I know, like at the restaurants and all, they have so much trouble getting employees because of the housing costs and all. I know that somebody once said, well, if the motels are short on people booking rooms, maybe they could make some of those bunk rooms for summer help. I mean, is that a problem? The restaurant's not getting enough help? Sometimes you go into one and there'll be hardly anyone in the parking lot, but you can't get a table because there's not enough waitresses.
Or waiters.
Or waitresses.
I think everybody needs help, not only food service, but I mean, there's for hire signs everywhere. Housing hasn't been discussed yet tonight. I personally think, and again, there's some interesting slides here. One side said something to the effect, should the town attract more people? And the majority answer was no. That's an interesting. But should the town attract more business? The answer is yes. If you really think about that, those two don't work. I mentioned inconsistent answers, right? But personally, I think housing is an issue, and can Boulder Junction double in population? I would say that's very difficult to happen because we don't have enough land that's developable right now, right? Would that be kind of a fair statement to make? But I think we do need to ideally increase housing options and opportunities, particularly for what's now being labeled workforce housing. Housing that the people that work in your community can afford to live. And I think the slide, part of that slide, it's not a full number, but there are people that live near Boulder Junction that would consider living in Boulder Junction if there was housing that they could afford to live in. Other comments, questions? I'm getting my steps in, this is great.
Mark Westfall, Boulder Junction resident. I don't know if I did not see the slide or the question, but was there anything that related to education in schools? As far as, are people concerned about education options, grade schools for their children?
That's one of our strengths.
Yeah, and so quality of education, I guess I did not see that there and wondered what impact it would have as far as attracting people to Boulder Junction.
Well, Doug's looking. I don't think technically we asked anything specific about education. I think, as you can see, the gist of the survey was to look at economic, when I say growth, economics. Do you like the community? Do you want to see it to grow? What do you think the strengths and what do you think the weaknesses are? And again, look for opportunities in the recreation area. Is there opportunities, we mentioned the shooting range, but are there other opportunities that we should be looking at expanding, because some of it will flow from it? I want to pick on Dean and just say, representing the chamber, what did you see tonight that you think could be of value to the chamber?
Sure.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Dina, Boulder Junction resident, and also the executive director at the chamber. The biggest thing that jumped out for me that I was going to raise my hand about was housing. And for us at the chamber, this is something that our businesses have talked to us about. It's something that visitors have talked to us about in wanting to make that jump and move here full time, but not being able to find housing. And it's not always about cost, it's about availability, just not having it, period. And I do think that that is an opportunity for us moving forward. And I also do want to echo Jeff's sentiments about the importance of tourism to our economy. And again, I might be a little biased with what I do for a living, but nonetheless, I do think that that is very important as we do move forward. And part of that is also, in my mind, creating that bridge between bringing somebody in who's a visitor and then making it a reality for them to move here full time. And I do think that housing is that missing piece here that overall could be an opportunity for us.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, back to, if you said what are opportunities that we could do, one of the things we did drill in when we were just playing around with this, so the number one business that people said they would support is a bakery, right? But we also looked at how did the residents of Boulder answer that question versus the tourists? And the residents were also 71% saying they would support a bakery. So to me, there's an example of if we were trying to, and we know there's been a history of bakeries in Boulder Junction. I would go so far as to say most of them were financially successful.
Just the workload.
Yeah, they went out of business because somebody didn't want to work that hard. But if we were saying what type of a business could or should we try and attract to Boulder Junction, a bakery should be at the top of the list. And we could actually show that prospective business owner that the locals will support it. It's not just going to be a tourist-based business, as opposed to if you looked down that list. I wouldn't tell an accountant not to come to Boulder, but I could certainly tell them Boulder Junction's not looking for an accountant. Any other questions, comments? Tom, did you notice like 17% of the people said they come to Boulder Junction for the flea market? But there was a point, you and I have had these conversations, mostly on the golf course, but what can the flea market do to expand as opposed to contract because of, now you're back to the demographics. Look at the people that sell in the flea market. They're, I hate to say this, they're a dying demographic, literally, okay?
Absolutely, Bill.
So, so
And
Tom, I mean, we've talked about this. What could the flea market do to add to what they're doing to be an economic driver on Tuesday mornings?
I've been running the flea market now for probably 10 years, and unfortunately, as Bill suggested, it is kind of, the flea market vendors are a dying breed. And if you come to the flea market, Paula, who helps me every week at the flea market, will probably attest to this. You look at the vendors, they tend to be elderly people. We're not, you know, and literally, I am having vendors dying off. And they're not getting replaced with younger people. And it is a case of demographics. Flea market is very successful, relatively speaking, but we are seeing a decline in participation among the vendors. And if the vendors decline, the draw of the customers will also decline.
So, I'm Henry Roy. Live in Boulder Junction. The recent census, and this is along what your lines were in terms of the demographic. The recent census shows northern Wisconsin, Oneida, Forest, Silas, et cetera, increasing in population. Unfortunately, the demographic is 55 and older. It's a huge, and the analysis is it's a big problem because young families aren't moving here. It's increasingly difficult. We just lost, Sherry knows, we lost the assistant librarian who did the Friday or the Wednesday thing. One of the problems was, I think I'm okay saying it, was I think she had a 3, a 7, and a 13-year-old. She spent 20 hours a day, or a week rather, taking the kids. You know, it's difficult. She had to go to Rhinelander for dance classes. You know, I think you get the picture. It's difficult and to raise a family up here. Broadband was helpful, but it doesn't solve that problem. You know, what do you do in terms of here's the problem. As you pointed out, there were a lot more kids. Now there are less kids. So you have less kids. So you want the kids to interact with other kids. So how do you do that? Well, you've got to go schlep them to Minocqua. You got to go to wherever, up to Prescott. I think you get what I'm driving at. So I guess as a group, I don't know, I guess you'd want to analyze, okay, so we know where we're headed. We're headed towards 55 or older. But if we want to get young blood in, what do we do? And it's just not a problem. And as you recognize, it's not a problem of just Boulder Junction, it's an endemic problem of northern Wisconsin.
Something that the illustration that was given to me years ago on this topic that has stuck with me forever came from the DNR. And it came from my favorite lake, Trout Lake. And they were talking about the walleyes in there. The walleye reproduction had collapsed. And you could go down there and I would talk to them. I was down there with them in the spring. You'd see 50, 100, 200 walleyes coming in. Every one of them was 10 pounds plus. And the DNR says that's the problem. We're not getting new recruitment, and without getting new recruitment, any system collapses. So we have to look at that, and I've never forgotten that, because you think we got to find some ways to get some young people. We have snagged a few, but we got to get better at it.
I'm not saying it's an impossible task, but I think if you're going to look, if you view it as demographic as an issue, that being not having a younger group, and it's just not housing, it's an overall situation problem, then I guess we need to, as a committee, you'd want to address that. Say, okay, this is really, we want younger people.
And
Not that nothing's wrong with old, I'm an old heart, so I mean.
and as you're talking about the youth, and Dick, you're on the Parks Board, but it's my understanding the Parks Board is basically recommending to the town that they discontinue the summer youth program largely driven by the inability to get adequate staff to run that program? Is that, am I accurate, Nick?
That's one of the primary reasons. The reason we had to cancel this year's program is we couldn't recruit assistants for the director. And that coupled with liabilities and other concerns for running a program, it made it very difficult to deliver something specifically for the young people.
So, and I'm gonna go back to, I'll be right back to Tom, what you said. So if you think about the flea market, just per se, hopefully we're getting a new playground, right? So maybe the flea market cannot grow by getting more vendors just because there aren't vendors out there. But what other activities could be incorporated into Tuesday morning in Boulder Junction to augment the flea market? Could there be a Tuesday morning youth program, something that has to do with the playground, something that has to do with the, follow me? That, and again, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and sharing, and hopefully this isn't the last time we do this. Because to me, part of it is literally the brainstorming to say, you know, it's easy to say, what's the committee going to do? When are they going to do it? And please report back to us, okay? So remember, the first Wednesday of the month at 8:30, I'll be looking forward to it.
Ellen Murphy-Blank again. Just, I just want to make a word of caution here. Lots of talk about bringing in families and kids, but time out, folks. Kids these days, it wasn't like when we were kids in the 50s and 60s playing out in the street and playing in the neighborhood and walking to school. It's a different world. Parents are schlepping kids all over the place to all of their activities, regardless of where they live. Be it, in a big city, in the suburbs, parents are schlepping kids. That's a fact of life. Problem up here is the schlep is 45 minutes to an hour to go anywhere. So yes, having more young families in would be great, but I think we also have to realize it is a different world. Bringing in more telecommuters. I started telecommuting full-time in this town in 2006. I won't even talk about the hoops I had to jump through to do that, but that is a valid option. Looking at different, it's a different demographic. Getting in more farmers market vendors on Tuesday. There's all sorts of things that can be done with tweaks without spending a lot of time lamenting things that cannot be changed and focusing on the actionable items.
Bill, we've talked about getting young people here, but I think also we have to talk about job opportunities for those young people. There's the internet economy and people can work from home to a certain extent, but you talk about the good old days, 40 or 50 years ago, when working off the land, I'm talking about logging and perhaps mining up in the UP, that sort of thing. You go up to, it's depressing to go up into the UP now because of the lack of job opportunities up there and to a lesser extent here as well. And if we want more young people, I think we need to be able to provide job opportunities for those people. And I don't know where we go with that.
We're an entrepreneurial community. Not working for employers, but people taking the opportunity in their own hands to provide a service, earn money, and there's huge opportunity out there. But we're not teaching our young kids that in any way to come out there and how to get involved on their own. You could bring 10 people, 25-year-old, and they wouldn't have a day off next summer if you had that many people up here to work. And I think it's focusing on the fact that entrepreneurial, learning how to run your own business, not just trying to think. The day of going to the factory and punching your card in and making refrigerators, that's gone pretty much anyhow. So, and when you talk about your flea market, Barb's two daughters did lots of selling on like flea market stuff. They did it all online. They all on eBay and different things. And I'm gonna shut up.
I think a couple comments. One, I think that for us as a town to develop a long-range plan is probably 30 years overdue. So Bill, I hope you're right, that we're gonna go ahead and begin that process because
Come to the budget meeting.
it's critical. The second thing we need to recognize is that we've been a tourism-driven economy for decades. I mean, I've been here for 70 years, so I know what town looked like 70 years ago. I know what's changed, I know what's the same. But the reality is, north of Stevens Point, we will never get a four-year university. We will never get an interstate highway. Therefore, from an economic development standpoint, growth, which now is supported by broadband, which we wanted for ourselves, but we wanted it for economic development, is going to have to be aimed at those businesses that are suitable for an environment like this. And one of the aces in the hole we have is quality of life, which if we really do this right, there are still millions of people in this country that would relocate to an area like this if they knew that the economy would support the kind of work they want to do. And will they all have young kids? Maybe, maybe not. But we do need to think long range, and we do need to take advantage of our assets. And we need to be realistic because we're not going to get heavy manufacturing, but could we get 3D manufacturing that can go out and use yes packages? Yeah. I mean, can we do more with service businesses and other things? Yeah. Do we need housing? Absolutely. And all different kinds, high density, low density. We need all sorts of things. Not much space to do that. So we're going to have to really think about this, and it's not going to be simple. It's not going to be quick, but we need to be brutally realistic with what we can and can't do. And so I think that's why the process, I think it's time for us to be very forward looking.
Steve, just real quick, my last conversation, which was many months ago with the Vilas County Economic Development Court, they are not trying to recruit retirees to Vilas County. They won't say that publicly, but they are not. Because their attitude is, we have enough. They are spending 100% of their time, effort, and energy to try and recruit basically remote workers because we don't have the heavy industry. But the question I asked them was, that's great. You recruit somebody who works for whoever, can work remotely. What do they need? Broadband. Now you're talking Vilas County. A lot of Vilas County has no broadband yet. And they need a place they can afford to buy to live in. So to me, housing is really key, but Steve?
One area that hasn't been talked about, touches on what Jeff was talking about, that is the trades. Anybody that's tried to build a house up here right now, try to find, an electrician, a plumber, is almost impossible. And so I think that's something that when you think about who would you recruit up here, entrepreneurial young people that are interested in starting a business. I mean, the sky is the limit right now for electricians and plumbers. Chuck went and bought the house from your family, from Coley and Katie's house, right? And he's got workers in there because he couldn't find people in the HVAC industry up here. And so he brought them up here. So he was trying to come up with a way to make that work. But I think that's an actionable item that when you think about it, you can't get any more people in this town if we can't build houses. And I agree, what's the up on this? We can get 15% more. But I think what we need to keep in mind is as the population ages, there will be real estate available. That is a guarantee. And I laugh at Jeff's comment. I don't know who remembers back in the day when the walleyes spawned down by headwaters. And you'd sit up on the bridge with a flashlight and see
Hundreds of them.
hundreds, if not thousands, all the way back to the corner. So that brought back some reminiscence there, Jeff. So, but I think that trades are an area that we as a community should focus on. Because, I mean, you think about the people we have here in the trades right now, they are getting to the point where they're getting tired.
And there's all the technical schools in the state. I mean, some of this stuff is going to require us to play an active role in going out and getting it.
Mid-state technical right now will pay 100% of tuition for anybody going in the trades. There are people that are funding it.
And I completely agree, but let's just as an example, if you said, what's the economic opportunity for a a tradesperson up here? Would it be reasonable to say that a plumber and electrician with good skill set and good business acronym should be able to make somewhere at the low end of $60,000 a year, and at the high end, it could be 120 or
Easy.
150?
And I know people that
Okay,
did.
so Jeff, as a realtor, if I walked in your office and said, I've got an income of $150,000, I'd like to buy a house. What's my market? And you're gonna say, well, using a 2 times multiplier of your income, you should probably be in the neighborhood of about 300.
But there's none out there, so.
There's none out there. So, if you wanna listen to a really good hour conversation, Grow North, familiar with Grow North, they ran an economic, what was that called, Dick, at Nicolay 2 weeks ago?
An economic development summit.
A summit at Nicolay College, and Dick can probably get you the link. All the presentations are on a link, but the first speaker was the president of the Federal Reserve out of Minneapolis. So he came over and spoke for the first hour, but I think he made some extremely insightful comments, and you and I were talking about this in your office, about, because several people said housing, because let's go back to the trades. If you had 10 houses for sale up here right now between $250,000 and $400,000, how long would it take you to sell them?
Just start making, fast, you can make some calls.
Yeah, you could sell them in,
Yeah.
so, yes, we need trades, but a tradesman's not gonna move here without housing. And the comments were, it's gonna take a private-public partnership. You know, it's gonna take some political will. And me personally, if you ask me, I think, if you ask what our committee should be working on, and to me, it'll be a project as big as the broadband is working on a housing project. And building 2 or 3 homes isn't gonna fix the problem, right? We need housing for 20 to 50 families. Is that a pretty good number?
But you need a model that works someplace else to try to apply here. Because when you're dealing with that demographic and everything like that, you can go south on you real quick.
But that, you know, anyway, who else has comments? And
I just got one quick question. What is affordable housing? What's the number? You say affordable housing, what is that number?
well, and I think that number depends on, it depends on the economy that you're in, and a couple things. When some people talk about affordable housing, they're actually talking about subsidized housing, people that qualify for low rent. The other phrase that tends to get used a lot, and I used it earlier, was workforce housing. What can, so if we bring a tradesman to town, let's just use 100,000 as a household income, maybe 120. That person really can price somewhere between 250 and 400, depending on interest rates.
Until they're developed, you're not gonna get them to that. That's once they're established.
Well, we gotta start with a starting point someplace.
Right, and then that's gotta be lower. It's gotta be a lower.
And I think part of what came up here to me was on the low end, but the slide we had, you know, people were, and to me, $700 is probably not realistic, right? But if you're talking 1,000 or maybe 1,200, 1,300 a month, whether it's rent or a house payment, that's probably the market.
Over the last couple of years, not right now, but before that, 3, 4, 5 years ago, you could find homes for sale in Boulder Junction under 100,000. And then with the interest rates that were at that time, the payment on the house was $500 to buy a house. But you gotta, the problem with starter homes isn't always starter homes. Part of it is the starting people that are gaining the skills that it takes to be successful, and they fall down once in a while.
The other thing I think we were trying to gather here, though, is does the community want to be bigger?
Some bigger people said no.
Do you want more housing? And I talked with, you know, somebody recently who said, yeah, Bill, I took the survey and I answered the question, do you want more people? I answered no. And do you want more businesses? I answered the question, yes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
But if
Not
you don't want more people, then you don't want more housing. Right? I mean, I have a joke that there's a lot of people that don't want Boulder Junction ever get a stop and go light, right?
Right.
I mean, it would ruin our town to have a stop and go light. So,
Until a
again,
couple of days in the summer.
but, and I think I'm gonna wrap this up unless other people have, anybody else have a comment? Bill, you've been kind of quiet in the corner over there. Mike. Bring the microphone over to you.
I'm Richard Phillips, and I'm another Texan. In any event, you know a lot about the housing issue. What's your proposal for housing? You asked me to ask a question.
99-cent 2x4s.
Yeah, right.
David Lockheed, you know him?
No.
Whose son is on White Sand Lake and has a banking background, attended one of our economic development meetings. So this isn't my answer. This is his answer to our committee. It's a three-step process. According to him, you need three things in place. One, if you don't have a plan, nobody's going to talk or listen to you. Second, you have to have identified the land, you know, and more than three things. A bank that's familiar with it. And he did mention Associated Bank is a bank that's deep in housing, because some of these banks are required to have a certain amount of their capital in housing developments, and you need a developer. And when you have those three things, but he said it all starts with a plan. He said the bank's not going to talk to you if you don't have some type of plan in place. So now, to specifically answer your question, I think we literally need to go through that process. We need to have a plan. The community, the Federal Reserve President's comment, you need some political will behind this. The community literally needs to say, we want to do this. You can't have one person say, I want to do it. Okay, and then we need to identify some land, whether it's private land. Look at the map in Dennis's wall. And if I said to you, Dennis, how much land is there in Boulder Junction right now that you could put anything other than single family on?
How much?
Yeah, the answer is like none, right?
None, well, very little.
Yeah, so you'd have to get some land rezoned. You'd have to identify some land, either the town would require it or the developer would require it, and get it rezoned. There are also a thing called tax credit housing projects, but they tend to be big in nature. Go north, we ran a seminar on those. There tend to be 30 to 50 units. But they suggested talking to the Grow North region that maybe, for example, could the Boulder Junction and the Manitowish Waters cooperatively work on a single housing project where you did 20 units in Boulder Junction and 20 units in Manitowish Waters. Now you've got a big enough project to bring in a big developer, and you could do a tax credit project where the tax credits get sold to Fortune 500 companies. That helps offset the cost of the project. So just, I don't think it can't be done, but I think it'd be a big project, and I think it'll take a lot of push.
Do you think it can be done?
I think it can be done, yes.
Do you think it should be done?
I think it should be done, yes. I'm in the school of thought that, you know, to me, Boulder Junction, 975 people. If you said to me, what would be ideal in 10 years? 1,200.
Yeah.
I mean, is Boulder Junction going to go to 2,000? Not in my life.
No.
We have too much state land. I mean,
You're hitting it just right. Slow, steady growth is what the
Yeah,
community.
but to me, we need workforce housing. We need people that can afford to live here and afford based on their income that they're earning from a food service industry or the local marina or literally working at Coaching, right? If they can't afford to live in your town, somebody told me today, you know, there's people commuting from the UP, you mentioned the UP's economically depressed, to work in the restaurants and whatnot in Manitowish Waters and Winchester. And so to me, we need housing. If you want to grow the community, if you want to bring families in, I like your idea of attracting tradespeople, but they have to have a place they can afford to live in.
Thank
Your
you.
comments? Bill, did you want to say anything? I don't want to put you on the spot.
You know, the other thing, I think realistically, we need to start right at the bottom first step. And when I look around at businesses in Boulder, we've all been talking about employment. The first thing we need to be able to do is get enough people for the existing businesses that are already here to be open. We're not going to attract more people on an area that doesn't look like it has something going for it. And when services, I mean, being able to go out to a restaurant during the summer, when you go in and it's an hour and a half wait or something, you're probably gonna leave, or at least I do. So we really have to start at the base level, you know, attracting families with a projected income of $120,000 a year is great. But we can't take care of those that we have right now to get housing for those people as opposed to some kind of housing for people who are going to work in the food service, the waitress, the waiter, the bartender, the immediate things, tourism. We get back to tourism. That's the lifeblood of our community. Right now, it still is tourism.
And while those things are all going to evolve, our society is evolving as we speak. I mean, with broadband, the ability to work remotely, all these things, it will change the complexion of rural America. But right now, the immediate, what's the first step we can do? The first step is, let's make what we've got viable as quick as we can. Next year, the year after, what kind of a time frame are we looking about? A 5-year projection, and then, I mean, the comment, we might have to do some public, private, cooperative funding to make this happen. But, you gotta start with the most doable project that can get you a result. That's my thought. Thank you. Any other final comments? Or I think I'm gonna wrap it up. It's 8 o'clock. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming. You're always welcome to attend our meetings. Please take a cookie on your way home. Sherry, Doug, do you have any final comments, Doug? Okay, I'm gonna ask everybody to give Doug a round of applause like I said. A tremendous amount of time in this and we're not done. And again, for anybody in the room, you put the email address up there, or you can call one of us if there's more data you specifically want. Like, for example, if you own or run a restaurant and say, hey, how did the people in Boulder answer that question versus ours? We got that information. So anyway, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.
One quick, sorry, housekeeping. So this will be up on the library's YouTube page. So if you know of anybody that couldn't come tonight, that really wanted to hear this presentation, not just look at the slides, which will also be, but all you have to do is go to YouTube and search Boulder Junction Public Library to find it.
Thank you. And by the way, you can leave your chairs right where they
Yes.
are. They're going to be setting up for a meeting in here tomorrow. So they told us to just leave the chairs out. Thank you all.
Nice job, thank you.